The Chicago Bulls play their second preseason game today when they take the court against the Memphis Grizzlies at home in Chicago. But I'm going to talk about today why there are still some things that Billy Donovan has to figure out after a quote from Ayo Dosunmu. We'll talk about all that, plus dive into the mailbag right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Terry Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. And so, with all the other storylines that have popped up, the Zach LaVine, the what's going to happen with Jalen Smith and Nikola Vucevic and the Bulls defense, and of course, Josh Giddey, Patrick Williams not being healthy, all that, I think the lead has kind of gotten buried on two players that showed the most last year who are still in a lot of ways being overlooked. Now, I think that Ayo Dosunmu's kind of become the forgotten man, or just not forgotten, but just kind of guy who's just taken for granted. We know what Ayo Dosunmu brings, but I think in people talking about the ceiling and young players stepping up, Ayo Dosunmu's kind of fell by the wayside in that conversation just a little bit. And I think with Coby White, it's not just about him proving that he can do what he did last year again, but around the league proving that, hey, Coby White is a proven commodity. And there's a couple of things that go on that got me to getting into this conversation. One is a quote from Ayo Dosunmu who said this: "Of course, starting is a goal. I wouldn't sit here and tell you that I would just wake up and say, oh, I would love to come off the bench because I'm a competitor. You've never want to have that mindset, but it's all about winning games, and that's what I'll be going with. I'm all for doing whatever it takes to help the team win. That allows me to do the right things, be aggressive, just be an extension of the coach." Now, that is a great mindset to have from a player like Coby White, especially at the age that Coby White is at, because Ayo Dosunmu very well could be taking the mindset of, oh, I want to be a starter. These guys went out and got Josh Giddey. That should be my starting position. But no, Ayo Dosunmu still has taken on a leadership role over the course of this offseason. He still, through one preseason game, was the guy on the court that changed the energy of that Chicago Bulls team. But the Bulls sit in an interesting position that I think can get, like I said, buried in other things. It's not like Ayo Dosunmu and or Coby White have a long-term contract here with the Chicago Bulls. They are free agents at the end of next season. And while they may seem like it's further away than what it really is, we'll be talking about what the future is with Coby and Ayo on the Chicago Bulls sooner rather than later. And so with that being said, that this whole dynamic that the Bulls are hoping to go with, right? And I got asked this question on a live stream earlier in the week, and I was asked, well, Hayes, are you at all concerned with the Bulls wouldn't be willing to pay both Coby White, Ayo Dosunmu, and Josh Giddey, who all in the next couple of off seasons are going to be looking for contract extension? And that's a great question to ask. I think it's a great problem for where the Bulls are to have that level of talent, but it may come down to, and again, this isn't to have this conversation now. You want to see what's going to happen and develop on the court, because I still do think, part of my brain still thinks that we may find out that the best backcourt for the Chicago Bulls might be Ayo Dosunmu and Coby White out there together. Now, that's not a knock on Josh Giddey, right? You don't have to knock somebody else to talk about just how good another group is. And Josh Giddey and Coby White are going to have to figure out their chemistry. And through figuring that out, we may see that they have a great chemistry as well. We may see that the balance between those three guys opens up a lot. And, it's not like other teams haven't paid three guards, right? Now, they're all kind of in similar timelines as far as ages. I guess to say that Josh Giddey's like 3 years younger than Coby and Ayo. And so, it really depends on how the Bulls want to use their assets. Now, I've said this before. I do think that if, depending on where the Bulls draft in next year's draft, if they keep their draft pick, if the best player is a guard on that, hopefully a shooting guard rather than another point guard, if the best player is a shooting guard at that point, it could cause even more questions on what the Bulls do with their future, right? So there's questions there. And I think this quote from Ayo highlights that. Now, Ayo's going to be willing to accept what he accepts, and I do think there is a sense of pride for Ayo Dosunmu in playing for his hometown Chicago Bulls. But let's be clear here. That hometown pride only goes so far if other teams come calling when you're an unrestricted free agent and are offering you the bag, whereas the Bulls may have paid Giddey, may have paid Coby, and maybe they do have to look at their future situation. Now, I want to be clear. When you look at the Bulls' future cap situation, it's actually favorable for the Bulls to actually maybe able to keep all three of these guys, right? I think that that's I'm looking at it as the best case scenario. If Giddey, Coby, and Ayo all work out, then the best case scenario for the Bulls is that you have all those guys, they're all playing at a high level, and you want to pay them all. Now, the thing that could go in the direction that the Bulls may be willing to pay all three of those guys is that in the 2026-27 season, they'll have $121 million in cap space, right? So that goes from the season that next season, at the end of that season, between those 2 years, they'll have that much cap space. And at that point, you got to look at who's already locked into a contract. Josh Giddey will already be locked into a contract extension if he does get one with the Bulls. I do think that is very likely, right? Then Patrick Williams is already locked in all the way into 2028-29 at a flat $18 million. You don't have to worry about that. Nikola Vucevic is off your books by then. Lonzo Ball is off your books by then when it comes down to that as well. And then that does leave Javon Carter off your books by then. Chris Duarte off your books by then. Modest Bucilis is still on his rookie scale contract until 2028-29 as well, right? So there's a world in which the Bulls do. Now, Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, they will be up for an extensions at some point in time, but just because they haven't had a lot of opportunity to show the Bulls a lot, they may not get a huge contract extension. They may be more kind of what Coby and Ayo got in their contract, their restricted free agencies, than trying to get a max level deal. So the money could work, right? And that depends on how well these pieces work out for the Bulls. If Jalen Smith, who's on a reasonable $9 million contract, works out for the Bulls, right? So these things could work themselves out. It just depends on how the Bulls balance it. But it is something that the Bulls do have to look out for, right? In the future of this Bulls team, I think you want to keep as much talent as possible. Now, I also understand the merit from some Bulls fans that say, well, maybe you want to strike where the iron is hot, where the value is high. Maybe you want to move one of Coby or Ayo, especially if you feel like Giddey works, and then you can find a new reserve guard. There's a chance of that, right? I don't want to act at this point, anything's on the table. Now, I have what I think and what I want the Bulls to do, but that doesn't mean that that's what they're going to do. That doesn't mean that that's where their mindset is. And I think when you look at Ayo Dosunmu already established himself as a leader, while you're trying to build culture, do you want to let that go, right? And that's another aspect in what this Bulls team needs to look at as well, is that if you, at this point, Coby and Ayo step up as your leaders, if you lose one of those guys, what does that do to the culture that you're trying to build? That's a question that's left here as well. And this is going to be a question that goes through all the way through next year's trade deadline. And I want to be clear, this is not something that necessarily is going to answer itself. If anything, there may be more questions that present itself than answers over this next period of time. Because, listen, like I said, if Giddey works out, that's another question. If he doesn't, let's say that Giddey and Coby just don't work as a backcourt together, and it does look like Ayo and Coby are the best. Or hell, let's even throw in a different, weirder wrinkle to that. What if Giddey and Ayo look like the better case? What if Zach LaVine looks like somebody who you want to keep on this team long term, right? Those are questions that you have to ask yourself, and those are questions that are going to pop up as this thing goes on and moves along. But I think that it still just points to the direction that everything isn't nearly figured out with this Bulls team on just the players that we have here. That's not even factoring in who Modest is going to be, Patrick Williams, Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, how those guys develop, Adama Sanogo, what happens with our top 10 protected pick this year. All those are separate questions into the season, but one of the biggest ones is what's going on with Coby and Ayo, and how much do they show themselves as pieces that the Bulls just can't afford to lose, right? And the disrespect to Coby White as well has happened. Action Network, I believe, is what Action Network came out with a list of the top 100 top 100 players in the NBA, and Coby White came in at 85, with players like Malik Monk, Chris Paul currently, Derek Lively, Emmanuel Quickly listed all above Coby White. I don't necessarily agree with it. Now, there are absolutely people that should be, and I'm not saying that Coby White should be ranked necessarily in the top 50 right now. He had one season of still trying to prove, and he has to prove that he can do it for more and successive years, if that could be something that he can do consistently. And I understand that, right? That's always going to be a bit of doubt around a player who does it 1 year. You need to see more. But listen, the NBA may be sleeping on two guys that may be the reason, one of the biggest reasons, why this Chicago Bulls team wins basketball games this year. And that's just something that it's just continually going to be interesting to watch. It just is. Like, because these guys, man, I tell you what, I love these guys on the team. I love the identity. I love the players. The team got to still come up with this identity. And just the growth and how these guys have really excelled. Now, we've seen it before. We've been victims in Chicago of players having hot seasons and then completely falling off. We haven't seen any sign of that yet. If anything, I think the signs that we see that these guys may take their game even a step further next year. So don't let Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu be the forgotten guys in all of this, and they are a big pin in what could happen in the future with the Chicago Bulls. But let me know what you guys think on that down below. Now, for this game against the Memphis Grizzlies, what do I want to see? Again, preseason, I'm not doing in-depth analysis. I'm not doing specific matchups because we don't know how much these players are going to play. We don't know how much the Bulls starters are going to play. We don't know how much the Grizzlies starters are going to play, especially with already some injury concerns to some of their key players as well. We don't know what's going to happen there. But what I am looking for personally is just growth, right? The players that have looked like they're kind of out of sync and out of rhythm, how much more can you look more in rhythm, right? Josh Giddey, who in the second half was a much better than in the first half for Josh Giddey, but you're a new acquisition. You're the new point guard. We need you here on the court. We need you to be locked in. Him and Patrick Williams, yes, they had their injuries. I understand it, the foot and ankle injuries, but we need to see better from these guys. And also, I want to see the starting lineup actually use that quicker pace that we heard this lineup is going to use. But that's if we even have our starters out there, because it's very well possible that Ayo Dosunmu or Modest Bucilis could end up being in the starting lineup, depending on what Billy Donovan does if Coby sits. If Coby sits, do you start Ayo at the 2? Do you move Zach to the 2, start Modest at the 3? Do you start Torrey Craig at the 3 instead? Like, do you move P. Will to the 3, start Torrey Craig at the 4? There's a lot of different ways this Bulls coaching staff can go about it, but there is a chance that we could see a considerable change in the starting lineup because of Coby White and his status with that groin injury, and to see what happens there. Then, other than that, it's the same thing that it was last game. How do the young guys continue to step up? What do they show? Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, do they continue to look like guys who are going to make it hard for Billy Donovan not to play them? And then the back end of the bench guys, THT, Kenny Lofton Jr., Ernolot Batem, right? THT, who has his own injury concerns. I'm looking at these guys as well. What do they bring for this team? And I want to see Billy Donovan play more of Adama Sanogo, please. Like, I get it. I get it. He's on your team. He's on a contract. We know we're not cutting him. He's going to have his two-way contract spot. But listen, we want to see him. So play the man. Play the man. Let's play some of him, and let's see what's going to happen. And then let's just go forward into that, man. Like let just play Adama Sanogo. Let him show you what he can. This is the time where Adama needs to show you what he can bring at the NBA level, so that you know you can rely on him if need be for a few NBA games this season. So those are things that I really want to look out for. And then, of course, the continued play of Modest Bucilis. Like, I don't think there's any Bulls fan right now in existence that doesn't want to see more of Modest Bucilis playing basketball. We want to see Modest. Put the Modest touch out there. Let's get Modest Bucilis out there on the court, and let's see what he can bring. And that's why, honestly, if Coby does sit, I hope that Billy Donovan does take a shot at playing Modest Bucilis. Put out those two dynamic forwards potentially that you have out there with Modest and P. Will, and let's see what they got out there together, right? Like, that's what I would love to see. Modest get a chance to guard some starters in this league to show what he can do, because that on-ball defense does look like it has grown considerably for Modest Bucilis. So let's see what he can bring there as well. But that's my thoughts. Let me know what some of the things you guys are looking forward to in today's preseason game. Again, not going too in depth in the analysis there, because it's preseason, and preseason rotations can get really weird. So that's my thought process. Let me know what you guys think down below. Now, it's time to get into the mailbag. This first mailbag, this one is from Bastion.
Yo, what's up, Hayes? This is Bastion again. Yo, first of all, please confirm that you can watch NBA TV, or you can watch local games on NBA TV, because their website says otherwise, or at least it did the last time I looked at it. Other than that, I want to say I'm super excited about the season started today, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to surprise us. So many guys can really show up this season, at least in my opinion. Just to be controversial, I'm going to say this is probably the best team that Zach has played on. I think DeMar is the best player he's played with. Caruso is probably the best defensive player he's ever played with. But I think overall as a team and stylistically, that this is the best team that Zach has played on. He has some shooters around him. He has another person that can carry the load, and as a team, they can play at a faster pace. So I'm excited to see this season. I don't have big hopes for them, because I think they're going to have stumbling blocks, and they're going to have growing pains, but I'm super excited to see what the season has in store. All right, Hayes, you have a great day, and enjoy the season.
All right. So, yes, NBA League Pass games cannot be viewed if they are aired on a local network that you live on. So CHSN is airing the game, so more than likely, if you live in Chicago, unless you use a VPN, you're not going to be be able to watch Bulls games on League Pass. That's just a downside of living in the city and the current TV contracts. Apparently, the NBA is trying to change that going forward, but right now, that's the case. Now, as far as this being the best team that Zach has played on, I don't feel comfortable saying that yet. I think we got to see how this develops. Like, even on paper, I don't think we can say that. Like, that was a deep team when Lonzo was healthy, and I think that was still the best team that Zach's played on. We just didn't get to see it for a long stretch of time. Now, other than that team, yeah, this is the best team that Zach LaVine has played on, for sure. And I think the having Ayo, Coby, even the young guys off the bench and Modest Bucilla's, like, yeah, Josh Giddey being out there, Patrick Williams when he's locked in defensively, like, yeah, this is definitely the best team other than that team that Zach has played on. But playing faster doesn't necessarily mean playing better, right? And just because you have better pieces, it doesn't mean it's about how they fit together as well. And so that's where some of my pessimism in saying that, I just got to see it in the regular season, right? So I got to say that, and I got to see it like over a month in the regular season before I'm willing to say what it comes down to. And so, we'll see. Yes, stylistically, I love what we think this Bulls team is going to play stylistically. But like I said, playing faster doesn't necessarily mean playing better. And so you got to see how that's going to work out for these players as well. There's a lot of reason to think the way that you think. And I think that when it's all said and done, you're going to be right. It's just that I'm taking, I guess, more of a wait and see approach before I label it that, because we've been burnt by teams we think are going to be good on paper before. And I just don't want to be in the side of that again, where I'm coming into the season like, yeah, this is going to be the best team Zach's played on. We're going to be playing so fast. The offense is going to look so good. Because again, to play high up-tempo offense, a big part of that is how well you're able to get turnovers, get in passing lanes, get rebounds, right, to get out in transition. Now, you can still play faster in the half court with cutting, moving to the basket, moving around your actions a little bit faster. But I think a big part of that also is that if the Bulls are absolute barbecue chicken defensively, it's going to affect how up-tempo that they can play. And so we got to see what that's going to come down to as well. But great voicemail there, Bastion. Thank you for leaving that. Let's get into this next voicemail. This one is from TJ.
So what's up, Hayes? It's TJ. I got a question for you, man. I've been hearing you talk about culture and identity and stuff when it comes to this team and how we don't have one. I was wondering, how does a team actually go about creating a culture or identity? Also wanted to know what's the difference, if there is a difference between culture and identity, and what culture do you think this Bulls team should be looking to build? Also, this is the last part of this question. What was your favorite culture team for us? Like, which example of a Bulls culture was your favorite? Yeah, that was it, man. T-Red Bulls Nation, man. Stay blessed. I'm like,
great question here. Difference between culture and identity. Here's the thing that I'll say. Culture is the franchise, right? Identity is on the court. That's the way that I look at it. Like, a team can have multiple identities but still have the same culture. Like, I think when you look at Heat culture, right, they've had multiple teams with different identities on the court because Eric Spoelstra can adapt what the identity of that team is based on the players that are there to execute his system, based off building the system around the strengths of the players that are there. So culture is the franchise, right? When you have a winning culture, you have a culture built into your franchise that has a level of expectations, that has a level of performance, that has a level of we're going to go out there and all put it on the court for each other. The identity is the thing that's on the court, at least to me. That's how and people may view it differently. Please do not hesitate to sound off down below on how you view culture versus identity. I think identity is on the court. Culture is the franchise. And that's why I say the Bulls have had neither, right? I mean, every team, I guess, so to say, has an identity on the court because you know who that team is. When you say identity, I mean positive. Like, the Bulls' identity on the court has been struggle, has been hope, right? Has been that type of thing. And the culture behind the scenes for the Bulls or in the franchise has been one of non-focus, desperation, generational incompetence, like those type of things. So that's the way that I look at the difference between culture and identity. And to build a culture, the people that are leading your franchise have to have an expectation that's set. If you're going to come here and play in this jersey, if you're going to come here and play or coach for this franchise, this is the expectation of you. And we can't really have that when the people in the front office running the team have not even had a consistent expectation for themselves other than trying to sell us on things like being competitive and not when we really weren't, right? And then the identity, I think you can have two different, like if you have a coach with a great mindset that's a leader, that's all the things, the coach can set your identity. Or your players on your court for you on your roster can set your identity. In the perfect world, right, you get where both mesh well. The identity that the coach wants meshes with the players, and they all buy in, and that's what gives that team identity that no matter who comes in, that expectation. Like one of the quotes that I always go to for culture and identity, Jaime Jaquez last year had a quote where he said, I had to learn to be a Miami Heat player before I learned what it was to be an NBA player. That's culture. Nobody's coming in here and saying, oh, I got to learn to be what is a Chicago Bull before being an NBA. Nobody's saying that about us, right? We don't have either right now. So hopefully that answered your question, TJ. Great question there. Great, insightful question. Thank you for asking that. All right, let's get into the next voicemail. This one is from Shay.
Okay, this is Shay. Look, man, I saw the first preseason game. Look, I never denied the fact that Nikola Vucevic is not the best defender. By all means, he sucks with this fast-paced offense, the fast-paced defense that we're trying to run. I get that. But what I'm trying to get people like C-Dub and everybody else to understand is the fact that you can't just put him on the bench for a guy like Jaden Smith. Like, for example, I used to say back in the day, why Taj Gibson ain't started over Carlos Boozer? Why he ain't just, which a lot of people probably wanted that too, because Taj Gibson is a much better defender. But now that I'm older, now that I'm grown, and I actually look at the game, you can't necessarily put a guy like Carlos Boozer behind Taj Gibson due to the fact, not just because the contract was much bigger than Taj, but Boozer still averaged the numbers that went along good, especially with knowing that Derrick Rose was probably the only true scorer that could get his own shots on the team, and you probably basically needed Boozer in that starting lineup next to Joakim Noah, a guy who's not offensively impaired. That's not to say that this team is that, but the fact that Vooch gives you consistent rebound, he's going to give you double digits of rebounding on a nightly basis. You can't afford to necessarily have that coming off of the bench for you, especially with the scoring. And let's face it, besides Coby and Zach LaVine, who in that starting lineup is going to score? I guarantee you, if Patrick Williams would probably show up and not be so passive, maybe then Billy Donovan would probably think twice about it. But due to the fact that it's not that much scoring in our starting lineup, I mean Josh Giddey, but he's not really a scorer. But it's only two scorers in Zach LaVine and Coby White. So yeah, you kind of do need Vooch in that sense. And plus he's like the only inside presence that we really have. So yeah, again, I'm not saying that he's not a bad defender, because he is. He's atrocious. And I know why people want Jalen Smith over him, but you can't just put the guy on the bench due to the fact of what I just said. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, tell me what you think. Peace.
All right, Shay. So I think you actually used a bad example. Because it's not just about, like, I get it, you're focusing on points, but I don't think that this Bulls team, the points is the most thing, because it's not just about how you score. It's also about how many things that you can stop. Yes, Vooch can still put up points, but Vooch has become one of the most inefficient scorers in the game of basketball. Now, part of that is how much he shoots the three ball. That goes to that as well. That's why I like to say always with Vooch, stay your big ass in the paint, because a lot of his inefficiency comes from how often he's going out to the three-point line. That's why I don't want to see the Bulls do the same thing with Jalen Smith. You don't want to see that. Like, being a 29% fairly high-volume three-point shooter is just not good, right? But then you also got to look at it when it comes down to it. Like, as a center, you want to be around 50%. He was 48.4%. Now, he was 52% the year before that. But then the first 2 years with the Bulls, 47 and 47%. He's not been really a good, efficient scorer either. And so when it comes down to in the starting lineup, it's about the balance there. And so, no, Jalen Smith doesn't necessarily have to score the points that Nikola Vucevic does in the same ways for him to be more impactful in that starting lineup. Because, again, there's something to be said about Jalen Smith being a lob threat, for him to be a better threat to run the floor with that team in that starting lineup if we get this offense up and running like Billy Donovan says he wants it to run. So I don't think that just looking at Vooch's scoring and rebounding, because, again, if you look at the rebounding rate, Jalen Smith's rebounding rate is actually about the same as Nikola Vucevic's. He just doesn't have the minutes that Vooch does. And so that's something you're going to have to look at for as well. Now, I want to be clear. I think that Vooch is going to start off the season as a starting center, but I don't know if he's going to hold on to that position based off fit. And so I get what you're saying. I get what you're coming down to and how you're trying to rationalize why Vooch should stay in that starting lineup, but there are a lot of reasons to think otherwise. Jalen Smith brings more defensive versatility. He brings some flaws still on ball, but not as big as Vooch is on ball. He's a better rim protector. He has been a better three-point shooter lately, but I still don't want him to become a huge three-point shooter. And his ability, if the Bulls are getting out in transition, his ability to run the court offers a new dynamic and wrinkle to that Bulls offense as well. So it's not as straightforward as an argument for either one of the guys, right? I think it just comes down to fit. That's what it comes down to. And Taj Gibson was more impactful next to Joakim Noah than Carlos Boozer was, right? Now, they were able to still start Booz, but when you look at it, who was out there in crunch time? It was Taj Gibson and Joakim Noah. It wasn't Carlos Boozer. As though the years went on with those guys being on the same team, you started seeing less and less fourth quarters that Carlos Boozer was playing because Taj Gibson offered more and better efficiency, and the defensive aspect helped that as well. So this is something you got to look at for as well. And I think we have a lot more scores. Josh Giddey, somebody who can score 17 points per game. Coby and Vooch can go. Coby and Zach can go over 20 points per game. Yeah, like at that point, you don't need 18 from Nikola Vucevic per se, right? We'll see what happens, though. We'll see what happens. But, guys, thank you for leaving those voicemails. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.